Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Protein Ramblings. Just me and Naomi here today.
Hello.
As you guys might have seen on Facebook, we've got a bit of an impromptu idea for a episode.
How did we get onto it? How did we decide to do this?
Because we were watching Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
And Whoopi Goldberg's in it.
Yes.
And then for some reason that led to us talking about Girl Interrupted.
Yes.
Because we couldn't remember if we had a little bit of a debate of it was Whoopi Goldberg in Girl Interrupted, and when I was looking up obviously I read the synopsis, and the thing that jumped out of me was that Winona Ryder's character is diagnosed with borderline personality disorder in that film. And as regular listeners will know, that is a diagnosis that I have myself. And I realized that I haven't seen that film in so long. And especially I haven't seen that film since I got my diagnosis. So I thought it would be an interesting exercise to rewatch that film from multiple angles. Obviously it's set in the 1960s, so it's an interesting, fictional, but still, somewhat accurate. Somewhat accurate. Look at what mental health care was like back then, and also just an interesting look at how borderline personality disorder is, or at least that era of borderline personality disorder is portrayed in movie. So that's what we did. We've just finished watching.
Yeah, literally half an hour ago?
Yeah, an hour ago. We just finished watching Girl Interrupted and Eating Dominoes. And
the pizza, not the toys.
But I think they might have known.
Well, never assume.
Well, anyway, it was definitely an interesting exercise. One that was actually you found the film a little bit more emotional this time round, and that's not to say it's not an emotionally charged film, because it very much is. But I definitely came away with a lot of interesting thoughts and feelings about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to start at the end, as we often do on this podcast. And my big takeaway from the end of the film was shit is not that simple.
No, this is the thing that really got me, that when I saw it the first time around, which would have been in the early 2000s, probably not long after it was released, it really treats mental illness as like this switch that you flip on and off, and you can be fixed. And once you're fixed, you never have a mental health problem again. You just go back into society and you don't ever have to think about that shit. And that's basically what happens to the character of Susanna in the films.
Yeah.
She achieves mental health and off she goes.
Yeah.
And that's bullshit.
Oh, isn't it just? It's the most epic form of bullshit. The end of the film, Winona Ryder's character is just like, I was a little bit sad, but I got better. What was interesting about the actual diagnosis in there, because there's that scene where they get into the head psychiatrist Ujima Flick office, and they get all their patient files. And reading through the
case notes,
their diagnosis, case notes, their files, the definitions, or at least some of the symptoms that were ascribed to borderline personality disorder there, are not a million miles away from how borderline personality disorder is characterized today, now that we have a much better understanding of the disorder. Now, there is a lot of dispute over the term borderline personality disorder, because in the film, Winona Ryder's character Susanna, when she's diagnosed, she's like, borderline between what and what?
Yeah.
And it is very much a bad name for the problem.
I think it's probably going to end up being, the way people don't talk about manic depressive disorder anymore. It's bipolar. That's the commonly used term. I think borderline probably deserves to undergo a similar renaming.
Well, I know one of the emotional instability disorder, or unstable emotional disorder, or something to that effect, is one of the terms that's trying to be more commonly used for the disorder.
Yeah.
So it is very interesting, and The one thing I will say is that there are some characteristics of Susanna Winona Ryder's character that are similar to borderline personality disorder, or at least my experiences with borderline personality disorder. It's a very varied disorder, so I can't really speak to everybody's experiences, but I would not necessarily attribute Susanna's character, or with Susanna, the character, her symptoms to borderline, or if I did, it would be a very mild case of borderline, I guess, because there was not a lot of that. One of, like, for me, and I know for a lot of other people that suffer, one of the real core tenets is severe lack of self-worth and almost, a self-hatred of sorts. And there are shades of that there. There are parts and times where she does kind of show a little bit of that, but it's not really prevalent. The overriding thing is she's depressed.
Yeah, that seems to be what's magnified. I mean, I haven't read the book. I know it's a memoir, so it's based on a woman's true experiences. I can't speak to those.
No.
But in the film, what they seem to have magnified is the sense that she doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. She's depressed. She's kind of lashing out at things.
Promiscuous.
She's promiscuous. She had sex with 2 people. Disgusting. But yeah, there's not, in my experience as someone who lives with someone with borderline,
hey,
I didn't see a lot of that in the film. There's nothing that I strongly recognized and identified as being part of borderline.
Well, one of the key things as well, I think, obviously it's an emotional instability disorder, and it's generally characterized by intense emotions, and it's one of the things that I always think it's a double-edged sword with borderline. It's kind of somewhat of a blessing, but hell of a curse as well. You feel emotions a lot stronger and a lot more deeply than people without borderline might.
Yeah.
And I don't want to make generalizations because, again, I said this isn't the same for everybody, and you can't generalize too much with these things. I'm just talking about personal experience here, and there are some benefits that can come with that, because I think you have a deeper. I think for me personally, I feel like I have maybe a deeper sense of empathy than maybe a normal person was, despite how much of an asshole I can be. And I can.
But that's the flip side of the coin, right?
Yeah. But I think that I understand. When people are sad, I feel like I can sense that a little bit more. Not always, and it's not. But I definitely think because you're living with so many tumultuous emotions all the time, you really start to recognize those emotions in other people.
Yeah.
Like I say, it's something that I actually, in some ways, kind of, I don't want to use the word but I choose to see as a positive side of the disorder, because it helps me to think of it as not a wholly negative effect.
Yeah.
I think that's the way that's probably the best way I can put it. What I did want to actually, because just in terms of because borderline, it's been a term, and it's been a term that's been bandied around for a very long time, but it's only in fairly recent times that it's actually been a clinical, a firm definition that's existed in the DSM. Can you remember what the DSM acronym stands for? Diagnostic something of medicine? Maybe. I forget. The DSM basically is the big book of disorders and things. If it's a recognized illness of some, it's in the DSM.
According to Google, it stands for Dutch State Minds.
It doesn't. That's not. Look for DSM Health or DSM Mental Health, and you'll find the acronym. But so the term first actually came.
Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
That's the one. I think we're on DSM-4 now,
Maybe
although
possibly
I know
5, I think.
No, I think it's 4. I don't know if it's 4 or 5, and I do know a lot of people still reference DSM-3, which is pretty archaic. And that's actually the first time BPD was really actually included in something.
This Girl Interrupted is set in the 60s. It looks like it wasn't a formally recognized condition or disorder or
till 1980.
Yeah, there was still research being done into it in the 60s, which I think is quite interesting in the light of the film and her being diagnosed with it.
Very, very much so. And it's also it just highlights that back in the 60s, 70s, that general era of terrible mental health care and diagnosis, and that just suck it up and don't be sad kind of attitude. Fucking boomers. It was literally like, oh, we don't really know what's wrong with you, so you're borderline.
Yeah, it was almost like a placeholder. Yeah, like we're going to put you down as this until we figure out something else.
It was also very much attributed to like an offshoot of schizophrenia, and having also been someone who suffered with at least schizophrenic symptoms, if not schizophrenia in its full blown hellscape. I've heard voices and had to take antipsychotics and things. Aren't I just a hot mess?
You're an interesting case study.
Yeah, I am that. It was very much like treated as kind of almost like being related to that, and I think now it's although there are a lot of is it comorbidity is the right yeah. So there's a lot of comorbidities that can happen with borderline. It generally doesn't manifest solely by itself. It's normally along with a number of other things. Like myself, I was borderline, PTSD, eating disorder, and depression, anxiety, and just a plethora of other shit. Like I'm again a hot mess. So it's definitely evolved. I mean, a quick timeline of BPD. So 1938 was the first term of the used, or the first time this started to kind of crop up. It was Aldous Stern, I believe. He lists the most diagnosed criteria and calls the group of people affected the borderline group. Then in 1941, Gregory Zilborg describes the disorder as a mild version of schizophrenia, which I really think is so far.
I do, but again, it's that thing of like, this is a placeholder diagnosis. Like we don't really know. We're going to put you down as borderline, and then later it'll probably turn out you're schizophrenic.
Yeah, I mean, it could be even like a name for like. Because schizophrenia can come on really intensely and just out of nowhere, but it can also steadily increase and get worse. So maybe it was something like, early stage schizophrenia was borderline, and then
you are on the borderline of becoming schizophrenic. Yeah, maybe.
Who knows how people back then thought, apart from wrong. Then in 1942, so a year later, Helena Deutsch defines the type of people dependent on other personalities as having an as-if personality. And like I was saying before, dependency and fear of abandonment as well are two of the really common symptoms of borderline personality disorder. Then, again in the 1940s, Robert Knight introduces ego psychology, and describes patients as being in borderline states. Now, I don't really know what he meant by borderline states, so I know from borderline personality disorder and my experiences, you do have high intensity states, because one of the characteristics, because I was saying, like, you feel emotion a lot more intensely. So imagine like a bell curve graph, and your baseline is right at the bottom of the bottom of the XY axis, and then you feel an emotion and it goes up. And normally what happens is people emotions go up and they come down and they give you that bell curve. So what happens with people with BPD is their emotional state will go up and it will hit that kind of peak of the bell curve, and then another thing will trigger another emotion or heighten that same emotion. And before your emotional state has had time to come back down to its resting norm, it heightens even further. And that cascades and cascades and cascades until you get into a manic episode or, a severe crisis, effectively, a crisis state. So I think that might be what he meant by borderline states, are those crisis periods. Then we kind of fast forward quite a few years into 1967 and Otto Kernberg. Have you noticed how it's a lot of like Germany, Dutchy type, though, like, well, Germany names? Like a lot of psychologists were Germans, right?
Based on this list, all of them were, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
apart from Robert Knight, I guess.
What was Freud German?
Was he Austrian?
Austrian? Well, same difference.
Was he? Come on now. You can't be saying things like that.
Did he talk like this?
He was Austrian.
Okay, so he was Austrian. So that neck of the woods at least. So I wonder what it was about. Do you reckon? Because when did Freud first come about?
Let's go back to Google.
Yeah, back to Google. You should go, because there's part of me at this one who was like, after the Second World War and Hitler, if they all just went, that guy was nuts.
Well, Sigmund Freud died in 1939.
Okay, so pre World War II, pre Hitler. Because I just wondering if a lot of German, Austrian, that kind of era were like, that guy was nuts. We need to look into this shit.
We've got some stuff to unpack.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was saying in 1967, Otto Kernberg defines boundaries between psychotic and neurotic, and he places a borderline personality in the middle.
So that to me is a little bit wrong. That as a definition of it is, I think, very interesting, misguided.
I'm sorry about the smacks there. I'm just supping on a gin and tonic. I mean, there's definitely neuroses in borderline. Like, oh god, there's definitely.
But I think saying that the spectrum is psychotic and neurotic.
Yeah, there's a lot in between those two. I feel.
Well, and there's a lot either side as well. Yeah.
But I mean, I just don't think there's a hard line between you're neurotic, now you're psychotic. Like,
yeah, it's not like that lethal dose of radiation thing. It's like up to this point you're fine.
Oh, you mean like in Star Trek? Yeah. Like in Star Trek Next Generation, like they're like 10 minutes until lethal radiation dose. I'm like, you're still going to be pretty sick in like, 5,
At 9 minutes and 59 seconds, we're good, but at 10 minutes, we're dead. And it seems like it's the same thing. Like, you're fine up to a certain point, but the minute you step...
You're psychotic.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Like, you were just a little bit nervous, but now you're crazy.
So after Otto, we come to 1968, again, another year later. Roy Grinker.
He doesn't sound German.
No, Grinker. That's an odd name.
Grinker's a bit Yorkshire.
Roy
Grinker. That's terrible. Grinker. I'm so sorry. That was a terrible Yorkshire accent.
Actually, I can normally do a fairly good Yorkshire accent. Sorry, Skelly. We're completely butchering your neck of the woods. Although Ghoul's a different accent altogether, but yeah. Roy Grinker does the first research into borderline personality disorder. So this is when it's really starting to be researched as it's, looked into with more depth to try and gain more understanding of this general catch-all disorder that they've kind of come up with and pulled out their arse. Then we fast forward again to the 70s and we get John Gunderson. That's definitely...
That's a bit Scandi.
Yeah, it could be Scandi.
Gunderson could be Scandinavian.
Could equally just be American as well. Like, Scandi refuge.
Gunderson.
John Gunderson. John Gunderson. PI.
I just say he could be a Pinkerton man, definitely.
Yeah. So he publishes research to help diagnose BPD. And that's the thing about BPD. It's a very, very difficult thing to diagnose. It's actually quite often... mental health professionals say BPD patients are some of the most difficult to work with as well. And because it's a very complex disorder, it's often misdiagnosed. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the common misdiagnoses a bit later on. In case you hadn't noticed, by the way, this is another mental health episode.
Sorry.
In case this wasn't really apparent. But we are going to get back to Girl Interrupted as well in a bit. But I just want to give some background because, I do research for this podcast sometimes. It's not just complete rambling mess. So Yes. We then go fast forward another 5 years and we finally get BPD included in, like we were saying, DSM-3. Then this is where the interesting stuff happens. In 1993, Marsha Linehan introduces dialectical behavioral therapy as an effective treatment. Now, you'll have heard me, if you've listened to our previous episodes on mental health, you'll have heard me talk about DBT because it was the therapy that I had for borderline, and it's really fascinating therapy. It's a very in-depth, complex, difficult therapy to actually do. But what's really cool about it and its conception is that Marsha Linehan herself was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and obviously went through a lot of different treatments and recognized that none of them worked. So she actually said, fuck this. I'm going to develop my own treatment for myself.
Blackjack and hookers. Maybe.
I don't know. Like she's. I mean, I think she might still be kicking around.
Yeah.
There are videos that she's put out on YouTube. I'll try and
cool.
I'll link to some in the show notes because I had to watch some of them as part of our BPD therapy. And the therapy itself is made up of multiple components, but veering back to what we were saying about the end of Girl Interrupted, about everything being, neatly tied off in a bow. That shit, do you know what? I'll come back to that in a minute. I'll finish this
we're nearly
timeline. We're nearly there, yeah. So after 1993 and Marsha Linehan developing BPD, we get the next year DSM-4 being published, and it further goes to define with a bit more nuance the symptoms of BPD required for diagnosis. Then we move to 2008, rapidly forward. And as we discussed in our special back in May, this is when the US House of Representatives actually declared May as the National Borderline Sorry, Nero is broken. Here is the emergency broadcast signal.
It is a mouthful of a sentence.
The US House of Representatives declared May the National Borderline Personality Disorder Awareness Month. Fucking hell. Like, it's not that hard to say. I can say it fluently in English when
well, as we've just proved, no, you could not. Do you want me to do it?
Yes. Let the author do it.
Oh, author, not narrator.
Still better. You have the best words. You are better with words than me.
The best words. The US House of Representatives declares May as the National Borderline Personality Disorder Awareness Month.
Fuck, I was hoping you'd cock it up. So I could just point and laugh. So, yeah. And then we come to the current times where there's still a lot of ongoing research going into the condition. Like I say, BPD, DBT rather, so many acronyms, and also BPD is like as an acronym so often confused. When you tell people you got BPD, like, oh, you're bipolar. It's like, no, there's two BPDs. I'm the other one, the less common one, or the less. Is it less glamorous? I don't know. Like, what defines the glamour of a mental health?
we could do a whole episode on like mental illness and art and my feelings about that. But
well, I mean, we're going to talk about it in this because, at least on in reference to Girl Interrupted and some other films as well. So, as I was saying, in regards to DBT and the end of, I was going to say Borderline Interrupted. The end of Girl Interrupted, like we were saying, she's just like, she's better. She leaves. She's better now, and it gives you that sense that, oh, this is just something that you can just tie a bow in and be off.
Yeah, and you'll never have to think about this again. It'll never be a problem in your life again because you have removed it from your system.
And even though, like online material will say that DBT can provide patients with remission, I think remission might be the wrong term, because what DBT does in its essence, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but what DBT really does is it gives you an understanding of your condition, but it also helps you to recognize your condition and the symptoms that come along with it, and gives you the tools to help manage it. And I think when you say remission, especially within the terms of a mental health issue, what you're actually meaning is you are in a place where you are able to cope and manage your condition on a day-to-day basis so it doesn't interfere with your life. That doesn't mean you don't still struggle and fight every day.
And I think that's true of, and not to take away from what we're talking about, but I think that's true of most, if not all, mental illnesses. You manage it every single day. There's never a point in my experience where I've just been like, that's gone now. I had 12 therapy sessions on the NHS and now I'm completely fixed. I've flipped that switch. It just doesn't happen.
No, I think, and this is what I was wanting to talk about, the end of Girl Interrupted. I thought, and a lot of films and media that deal with mental health, they always do seem to like either, oh well, he's crazy forever and he's in a padded cell for the rest of his life, or he got better and everything's fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it gives a false impression. Because, like, speaking from personal experience, all I ever wanted was just to be fixed, I just wanted to be normal and be better. And it's only through maturity and years have gone by and multiple different types of therapy, counseling, and my own research that I've come to that realization that, okay, yeah, do you know what? I'm never going to be what I would idealize as being normal or fixed. And that's okay. It's fine. But you need to understand, I think, once you understand that and you realize that actually you're, it's never going to go away. You're just going to get better and better and better at dealing with it. That's actually quite empowering in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it gives you a framework, doesn't it? To put yourself in.
It also, it gives you a framework. It gives you it gives you rationale, and it gives you objectivity. I think that's really, really important to dealing with the mental health disorder.
Definitely.
Especially because objectivity is something that you can lose so easily in the mess of noise and the intensity of emotion and everything else that goes on in your head, depending on your condition, of course. And like I say, I'm talking about my own personal experiences here, and I don't want to project my experiences onto anyone else out there, because I know everybody is individual and everyone has their own experiences. And there may well be people out there that have, they do say, I am 100% fine now. And if that is the case, I am the happiest for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, great.
Yeah.
Fucking amazing.
You deserve that.
Yeah.
Everybody deserves that.
Everybody
But
does.
I think, with Girl Interrupted,
it makes it seem so easy.
It does. It's just like, one day she decided she was just going to write about how she felt.
And talk.
And that kind of, it was almost like a purging. It's like you have to kind of bleed this wound, and once you've got rid of the bad blood, you're fine. And it also kind of set her above the other girls in the film. Like, she's not crazy the way they're crazy. They're crazy. She's just like, she's just going through some things, and once she's written about them, she'll be fine. She can go back to society.
What she is middle-class white crazy. I mean, she's suburban crazy. That's what it is, right?
It kind of is. It's very much treated as just like this blip in her life. And for some people, maybe that can be the case, but I don't know. I mean, like, my dad had a psychotic break. He was never the same afterwards.
Yeah.
He went back to work. He went back into society, but he was not fixed.
No.
And I think a problem with a lot of literature and films and materials that shine a light on mental health, maybe it's just because they want to put out a good message and be like, look, you could be going through this, it's fine, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
And that's the thing. There is a light at the end of the tunnel,
but it may not look like that. It's not that nice, tidy.
That light at the end of the tunnel.
Switch.
That light at the end of the tunnel is not an exit. It's just someone's turned on the lights and given you a clear path forward.
Yeah,
so you can see the rest of the tunnel and you know what's coming and you know what to expect.
Yeah,
that's the light at the end of the tunnel. It's not.
And none of this is to say that if you are suffering from any kind of mental health problem, you shouldn't seek help, because there's no point. Like, you should. Treatments are there. Treatments work. But I think giving this idea that it's flipping a switch, that it's something you can just put in a box and put away and never think about again, can in itself be damaging. Because if you relapse, if you don't... When I had to go back into counselling the second time for depression, I felt like a failure. I remember that was the thing I said to the counsellor. He was like, so, how's it going? I was like, I feel like such a failure because I'm back here, because I kind of thought I was done with this shit.
Yeah.
And he had to point out that, like, this is a maintenance thing. You may feel like this again in the future, and you may have to go back and speak to another counselor. It's not failing.
It's like taking a car in for a service.
Yeah, it's tuning up.
Yeah, it's taking a car in for, like your brain needs a service every now and again. Hell, I almost think that there's some benefit to, even if you don't have a mental health disorder, talking to someone sometimes can just, like, you might not even realize that there's something bothering you until you talk about it.
It's maybe one of the things we need to change about, maybe mental illness is the wrong term. If you thought about it like, you take care of your body by, in theory, exercising and eating well.
Not me.
And in theory, that means you then don't have to go to the doctor as often, right? So, maybe if we change the terminology and focus more on mental health, you take care of your brain and your emotions so that you don't have to go through anything more serious, rather than waiting till you're at breaking point.
I think that's very true. And again, that's something that would come with time and further reduction of that stigma around mental health issues. Because I think our generation are definitely a lot better and a lot more open. I think because a lot of our generation have dealt with depression, anxiety, and neurosis. Thanks, parents of the millennials. Like fucking boomers, just like. Anyway, but yeah, I think because a lot of us have dealt with, or at least know someone who has dealt with some form of, at least on a mild case, depression is so common, anxiety is so common, and then they can be a lot more, especially anxiety. People have a tendency to dismiss anxiety as not something that serious, but unless you've had anxiety, you don't realize how crippling that shit can be.
Even sometimes when you have it, you don't really realize how it's warping your view of the world. Like I as a person with anxiety, I think the way I think is completely normal. It's only when you say to somebody else, when you describe a scenario to them and explain why it was making you anxious, they're like, that's not a normal reaction to things.
So for you, like being outside,
looking in a mirror.
It's like I went into a room, there were 5 people. It was shit.
But it is shit.
Yeah.
Leave me alone with strangers.
This is why the pandemic is like her favorite.
I'm living my best life. I haven't seen another human being for weeks.
Apart from me, and I don't count.
No, you don't make me anxious.
No, I'm just not human. Big secret reveal.
It's not borderline, it's lizard personism.
I was going to say I'm an alien, but fine.
Also possible.
Fine, lump me in with the GOP.
Lizard people are aliens.
No, they're lizard people.
Yeah, but they're aliens. They're not native to Earth.
No, they're just slightly more evolved salamanders.
I think we're talking about different lizard people. You don't know the truth about the lizard people.
I'm talking about that X-Men where he's got the salamander hand.
What?
Not X-Men, X-Files.
It's like, I remember that X-Men.
No, you remember the killer that Mulder put away, and he gets the salamander hand and he comes stalking. Do you not remember that episode?
I do. I just never thought of it as the salamander hand.
Okay, well, anyway, back on track. So as we were talking about the diagnosis, the scene in Girl Interrupted where she's reading her diagnosis, there are some things in that do still ring true with the current criteria for diagnosis with borderline personality disorder today. So the main criteria, I have them here, I'm just going to read them off quickly, are intense fear of abandonment and frantic efforts to avoid it. And this is something that I like. You remember, you'd be like, "Oh, I'm going away for the night," and I just start an argument.
Yeah.
And it's like, and it's completely fucking irrational. And I know everything's fine, but there's just part of me that's like, "Well, fuck you, then." Fucking.
I'm gonna have my own night in with blackjack and hookers.
Which was largely,
and you're not invited.
Which was largely, actually, I'm going to have my own night in with whiskey and stabbing westward.
So, almost the same.
But that's one thing I think I like to think I've got a way better handle on that now. Like when you went, I still have a weird thing where if you're not there, I can't sleep in bed.
You can't sleep when I am there.
Well, I know, but I find the bed. I've got better. Like when you went back to the UK, when we were living back at the old place, I was okay. The first night I slept on the couch, but that was largely just because I got really stoned and fell asleep watching TV. I mean, there was part of it was like I just didn't. But the second night I went to bed, and and whereas before I would just not sleep in the bed because it just felt too devoid and empty.
Yeah.
I've shared the bed with you like virtually every night for the last 12 years.
Yeah.
It just feels weird when you're not there.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. Well, it's like if I wake up and you're not in bed because you're down here gaming or whatever, I have that moment where I'm like, everything's gone horribly wrong. And then I remember that you're in the house and it's fine. And we're not codependent at all.
No, we're very, very
I said that very
independent.
sarcastically, but we're actually not at all.
No, we're really not. Like, we're both very much independent, have our own interests and do our own things. We do a lot of stuff together, but that's because we're best friends as well. Look at us being smug about our relationship.
Relationship goals for
Yay. So yeah, that's one. The next one is risky, reckless, and impulsive behavior, which is God, I should like that. That's me to a T. Like impulsivity, like. Especially when it comes to buying shit, I'm just like, like case in point, earlier this month, I've just like bought over nearly $1,500 worth of board game. In
Not
fact,
just this morning.
No, but like earlier this month, off a friend, I bought $1,500 worth of board games because I'm just like, yeah, I want that. And it's like, it leads to problems because I've got like this compulsive collective type thing as well. So I collect now board games. Anime figurines, vape gear.
I think you could put tattoos in there.
Yeah, I definitely collect tattoos. I'm 75% covered, I would say.
Cats.
We only have 3.
Yeah, but we used to only have 1. So,
I don't think you can say you've got a collection of cats until you've got Olivia levels of cats.
Well, okay, we're not going into that level.
No. And the other things, I get, I'm starting to get a compulsion for collecting microphones now for the podcast.
Is it going to be tarantulas next?
No, I only want one tarantula. Okay. Because as much as I want the animal, there's a part of me that because you don't really handle tarantulas that much as a display piece as well, and it's your fault.
Sorry?
Well, no, it's what's her name in Blood Canticles?
Lola?
Yeah, what's her tarantula's name?
I can't remember.
You can't remember your own character.
A tarantula isn't a character.
She is.
She's named after a goddess.
Yeah,
Begins with an A.
The goddess of sloth.
I don't know.
Agora.
I haven't written a Blood Canticles book for a year or so.
Yeah.
I can't remember what's fucking happening.
So so reading through one of Naomi's books, which when the final one comes out, we're going to do an episode about those because part of me they're amazing. Anyway, so yeah, I collect a lot of stuff, video games, and whiskey, hot sauce, and this is the problem. All the things I want to collect are fucking expensive. So the next one is self-injurious behavior, including suicide thoughts or actions. Without dwelling on it and getting into too much of a depressing note, obviously I've got a history of self-harm and suicide attempts, so yeah, check. Next, we come to chronic boredom and or feelings of emptiness, and this was something that I still suffer with from now, and I characterize it almost as a kind of sense of listlessness. There'll be times where I'll just kind of be sat there and it's like I just don't know what to do. If everything feels kind of devoid and of anything, like everything kind of grays out, for want of a better term. Like you'll remember, I don't have it so much anymore, but I sometimes have those like really catatonic states.
Well, you have days where you're just like, so what's the plan today? And I'm like, there is no plan. Shit. Do we need a plan?
Yes, we always need a plan. But I'd have these like catatonic states where I just sit there and stare into space for like a good half hour, even an hour at a time. Those again have become less and less because when those tend to happen now, I employ a bit. I use the opportunity to practice mindfulness, and it helps that pass. So that's good. Hey, next, trouble maintaining personal relationships, and this has been one that, to some extent, I'm very fortunate in that I have a wealth of very patient and good close friends. So even though I may have strained relationships at times, people have stuck with me. I'm not always the easiest person to live with, but I also like to think that I'm at least a nice enough person to kind of be worth the while. So yeah,
well, I mean, I've stuck around for 12 years.
Yeah, so I think that one whereas maybe with a different group of friends, that might have been the case, but I've been very fortunate on that front. Then we move on to one that's...
Yes, check.
my calling card, my raison d'etre, my raison d'etre, if you will.
Yelling at inanimate objects.
Inappropriate anger. Like, I had an outburst of it the other day when I was just really stressed at work and the cats were being noisy. I'm just like, no, if you meow again, I will skin you alive. My God. But yeah, so I do that again. That's something that's a lot more in control these days. And I can kind of, even when I do have those outbursts, not long after I kind of return to normal and a bit of a baseline, I'm like, okay, yeah, I was being a dick. Like, gamer rage was one of my big things. Then on just intense mood swings, again, something I've managed to at least pretend not to have as much anymore, if not definitely, internally my mood might be swinging more than a pendulum on acid on speed. It's just like the whole, it's gonna be like a pendulum on acid. What would that be?
Just a wobbly mess.
Which is a person on acid. But yeah, it's something that, like, those intense mood swings, like I was talking about that bell curve before, of emotion on top of emotion on top of emotion. Those are what attribute to those really intense mood swings. Unstable sense of self-image is the next one. That can manifest in a lot of different ways. I think that's where I was talking about that sense of lack of self-worth, self-hatred. This can also include body dysmorphia. There are lots that is a very broad spectrum of things that can be characterized as an unstable sense of self-image. And the final one is dissociative symptoms and paranoid thoughts. Like, my paranoia at times has definitely got the better of me, especially in relation to work at times. I constantly question if I'm good enough or...
Don't eat the microphone, Kazu.
We've got it. Kazu, don't... so our main can just jumped up and is like trying to eat Naomi's microphone.
It's normally my hair, so...
And my beard. But yeah, so that's something that... I've definitely, the dissociative symptoms were never as strong for me, but I definitely had them. And when they, not strong was the wrong term, not as frequent, but they were strong when I did have them. Again, I don't think I've really had a dissociative episode. I'm trying to say for maybe like I don't know. So long that it's hard for me to think of my last real one. Again, this is just tantamount to, if you commit to to a therapy. Oh, excuse me. If you commit to a therapy like DBT, it can be very, very beneficial. But that's the thing with therapy as well. You really need to work at it to get the best of it.
Yeah, actually, I think that's something in the film that I did think rang true. Is there's a point where Susanna is like, "I'm going to use the resources in this place. I'm going to work on recovery." Yeah,
that's very true. And like I therapy sometimes is misunderstood in that people think of it as a medical treatment, like getting antibiotics. It's something that's given to you and you take it and then you're better. And that's not really true, at least not for most therapies. Obviously, medication can play a part in therapy, and obviously you just take that and that can help. But the actual therapy itself is something that you have to actively participate in and work at. Like with DBT, hell, I had homework. I'd not had homework since I was at school. I didn't do my fucking homework then. So, it's definitely something that you need to actively engage with and want to participate in order to get the benefit from it. And yeah, I'd agree. In terms of Girl Interrupted, that's one positive side of the way they portray things in there, in that like you say, she's like, no, I'm going to use this place, and she starts engaging with her doctors and therapists as guided and sometimes just abjectly terrible they are. I just dropped my vape, so Naomi,
as misguided and terrible as they are, it's still I think a good message that, like, you work with these people, they work with you. That's part of putting together your coping toolkit.
Yes, definitely. definitely. And with BPD, one of the notes here that I picked up, like I'm gonna all the reference material I've used to talk about BPD, I'll put in the show notes. But one of the things that the paragraphs that I've got here, which definitely reads true, is BPD symptoms pervade a person's life and they interfere with every aspect of that. And I can tell you that from experience. They interfere with learning, social activities, your job. And those suffering from BPD are very sensitive to environmental triggers. And that's really, really true. Like, you know, for me, certain TV shows, certain subject matters, hell, even just sometimes if I was having a particularly bad period, I could be in a bar with my friends and, you know, I'd go to the bathroom, and then while I was in the bathroom, just be all of a sudden, like, everybody hates me. It's just like, you know, it's very irrational at times. And it is really something that pervades, like you say, it just infects every aspect of your life. The pattern of symptoms can often be present in more than one setting as well. So sometimes you might not. This is why DBT is really, really good, because it helps you understand what your triggers are and what thing you might realize that there are things that trigger the symptoms and these heightened emotions that you didn't realize were doing that before. So it helps you to better prepare if you know you have to go into those situations. Like it was mentioned before, my job, I'd be very paranoid a lot of the time about my bosses and things, and understanding that made it easier to rationalize those paranoid things of like, no, this is probably just in my head. And if it ever got really bad, I was actually able to just kind of like talk to the person as opposed to letting things spiral inside my own head. But yeah, like I was saying earlier, it takes a very, very skilled clinician to diagnose BPD, because there are so many potential misdiagnoses for BPD, because it has a lot of characteristics of other traumas and disorders in there as well. One of the most common is CPTSD, like complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Thank you, woman with words.
You're welcome. I thought you were just gonna be like, "Thank you, woman." And I was ready to be all like, "How dare you?"
No, I've only ever called you woman in jest.
That's true.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like indoors or the old ball and chain. Indoors is still my favorite.
That's what Skelly used to call me when we lived together.
Indoors. But yeah, well, like, to be honest, it's not the most non-accurate description.
It's not untrue, yeah. I am usually indoors.
Well, like I mentioned, I was diagnosed with some PTSD symptoms as well, and that, like I say, there were a lot of similarities between post-traumatic stress disorder and borderline. So it's quite often a misdiagnosis that happens. I mean, there was a period of time where people were leaning towards thinking, actually, no, maybe we should just reclassify borderline as some kind of post-traumatic
Why
can't
disorder.
I speak today?
It's the gin.
This is. I've drunk half a glass of gin. This is not a good track for a podcast host. Jesus wept. But yes, like I was saying, there was a period of time where they were discussing, like I say, medical health professionals tabled the idea of kind of treating BPD is just a form of PTSD, but that was eventually shot down because there are some fairly significant differentiating factors. It's just there's quite often a lot. BPD can be like one of it. It's quite often to find people sufferers of BPD have some form of trauma in their lives, which is why this was kind of like maybe it's this. But there's so much more that goes with BPD than just the trauma, which is why that and then the other one, bipolar disorder, can often be misdiagnosed as well as misunderstood because the acronym same thing. But because of those crisis periods of heightened emotion that comes with borderline, they can often be seen as the kind of highs and manics of bipolar. And then obviously you do have very morose and depressed periods as well. So again, if you're not a skilled clinician and know what to look for, yeah, it's easy to see why those two different things could be confused.
Yeah. I think as well, because there's a lack of understanding about borderline and what it is and how it manifests, there's misunderstanding amongst clinicians and therapists as to what a person with borderline is like. You know, I've read articles where therapists will say people with borderline are manipulative, they can't be trusted, and it's almost like they're bracketing it with, you know, more extreme antisocial personality disorders. What's happening?
Nothing's happening.
Okay, so well, that was the end of my point.
Okay, sorry. I was just tweaking with some volume settings. But yes, like I was saying, yeah, there is that constant thing of. In fact, you know what? This is a good time to cycle back to movies and portrayals. So that manipulative side of things, I think, because yes, there is an element of people with BPD being manipulative to a degree. It's not manipulation in the typical sense. Like, it's not the manipulation that you would see from someone like a sociopath who, you know, who can identify people's weaknesses, prey upon them, and manipulate people to their own ends. Typically, the manipulation from BPD, it comes from that fear of abandonment and not wanting to be left alone. So you manipulate scenario, like me having arguments with you and things like that. Although, you know, it's like, I don't want you to leave, so I'm going to have an argument with you because that'll make you want to stay.
Yeah. This is creating a positive environment.
Yeah. So one really good example of a bad example of borderline personality disorder displayed. Fuck my life.
Depicted
or displayed.
Or portrayed.
Portrayed. Yeah, so depicted and portrayed becomes displayed.
Detrayed?
Displayed is in a 1971 Clint Eastwood film. I mean, given Clint Eastwood's recent track record, already off to a bad start there, although do love some classic Eastwood films. The film's called Play Misty for Me. In it, Clint Eastwood plays a radio DJ, often does poetry on radio, but there's this one woman that constantly calls into the radio station and asks him to play this jazz song called Misty. Eventually she meets up with him, like she tracks him down, meets up with him, they get into a relationship, and she becomes like really obsessive, and she hurts herself, threatens to kill herself, and like if he leaves, and she stabs a housemaid or something like that and ends up in a psychiatric hospital. Then he meets up with an ex-girlfriend, gets into a relationship with her. Then he's on the air. She phones in again. This character being portrayed as having BPD calls in.
She called Evelyn?
Sorry?
Evelyn.
Yeah, Evelyn, thank you. Yeah, she calls back into the radio station to say that she wants him to play Misty again. And then she says she's going to Hawaii. She's better now. Oh, yes, everything's great. I'm out of the psychiatric hospital. And then the next thing, I believe she shows, like, he's asleep and she shows up in his house and tries to stab him in his sleep. He gets away and calls the police, but she legs it. And then he tells his girlfriend at the time, look, stay away from me from the time being because this shit's dangerous. She might come after you. Eventually, she ends up becoming the housemate. She tracks down his girlfriend and becomes the housemate of his girlfriend, which is, you know, it's basically taking, and it all ends badly. She kidnaps his girlfriend. then she attacks him with a butcher knife. She slashes him. And then because he's Clint Eastwood, he punches her out and knocks her down because, to quote Sean Connery, women just need hitting sometimes. But yeah, and he knocks her through a window over a railing, and she dies on a rocky shore below. So that's the way to treat people.
The most effective treatment for any mental health condition.
Kill the person. So that's a really extreme amplified portrayal of borderline personality disorder, and using disorders like that. I'm really critical of films that use a real disorder, to create a bad guy.
Yeah, it's really lazy, and it happens so often. Just like they're bad because they're mentally ill, because mentally ill people are bad.
Yeah, and that, you want to talk about the stigma around mental health, and mainstream media has a lot to answer for that. How many times have you seen a bad guy that ends up in a psychiatric institution at the end of the day? Case in point, the Joker. I'm not saying the Joker's a good guy, right? But look, all the Batman villains get sent to Arkham, which is a mental institution. So they're all bad because they're insane.
Or does Gotham just have a too robust mental health system?
Or maybe there's something in maybe Gotham's just depressing as fuck.
I think that's probably true.
Yeah,
I think that's probably a strong case. But yeah, films like this and some of the other ones we looked at before we started recording, it's because of the era they're from. They're kind of pre-1990s, I think, a lot of them. This one is from the 70s. Play Misty for me, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It's, we've got this term, borderline personality disorder. The movie viewing audience probably aren't really going to know what it means. It sounds a bit upsetting and a bit unsettling. It'll do. Slap it in there. Yeah, definitely.
Some of the other actually one of my favorite it's not they don't explicitly say that he has BPD, and I don't think that was necessarily the director intentions, but it's been used as a case study example. A psychiatrist, Eric Bowie.
Yeah.
Boy. Yeah, I'm not sure. BUI, however you, and Rachel Rodgers put forward the argument that Anakin Skywalker, Darth Vader in Star Wars, obviously.
Oh, that Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, no, the other one. The other one from NYPD Blue.
There's your crossover.
Hey, man, same universe as X-Files, I think. But he meets 6 of the 9 diagnostic criteria for borderline personality disorder, and he's actually been a useful example for training psychiatrists and clinicians to explain BPD. That's really interesting. Yeah. I never really thought about that.
No, but when you do, I've only seen the first of the new. They're not new anymore. The first of the
bad ones
trilogy.
The bad ones.
But a lot of the formative events in his life are very traumatic. So it kind of tracks.
Yeah, completely. But one of the key things that they really focus on are the character's fear of abandonment. Obviously, he's scared that Padme is going to leave him, and he's scared that Obi-Wan's going to leave him, and he has those uncertainty over his identity, who am I, where did I come from, why am I so powerful, am I good, am I bad, am I a bad actor? Yes. Do I like sand? Do I not like? Do I like sand? Do I not like sand?
I feel like he definitely didn't like sand.
He definitely didn't like sand. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe it was too much sand.
Maybe they just taken him away from Tatooine.
Too much sand causes mental health illness. You've heard it here first. So stay away from beaches, everybody.
You're cured, people. You're welcome.
Yeah. Pull the sand out your shoes and get on with it. The boomer approach. And also his disassociative episode, which, obviously the Force, and maybe the Force is all in his head. Maybe everyone who thinks they've got the Force is actually just mentally ill.
Maybe the Force makes you mentally ill.
To be honest, it's very possible. Being connected to every living being.
It sounds pretty tiring.
It really does. It's when you, what was it we were watching recently with Oh, it was an episode of the Star Trek.
That's all we've been watching recently.
The Betazoid, who's really goes
connected to the universe.
Yeah. Also, other examples that have been cited, which I'm probably not going to go into too much detail about, because you just don't know enough about them. But single white female, a thin line between love and hate, filth, fatal attraction, crush, mad love, malicious interiors, Mr. Nobody, Moksha, Margot at the Wedding, Welcome to Me. And the one I was saving to last because I find it really abhorrent and somewhat repugnant is The Cable Guy, the Jim Carrey film.
I haven't seen The Cable Guy, but I know what Jim Carrey films are like as a general rule.
I mean, like, to say that, like, I've met many people with borderline. No. There's borderline and there's a fucking raving lunatic, which is what Jim Carrey typically depicts. So yeah, like in general, I think there's a long way to go I think there are some films which are very well intentioned. I believe Girl Interrupted is very well intentioned.
Yeah.
I just think that, with some aspects of it, they glamorize mental health.
I think so. I wonder
if you look at Angelina Jolie's character in that.
Yeah, she's cool, man.
Yeah,
she's awesome. She probably shouldn't think that, but she is. But I mean, I wonder if as well, when Girl Interrupted came out in 1999, it was probably revolutionary is too strong a word, but it was probably saying things about mental health that weren't said very often, particularly about women's mental health and particularly about women's mental health in the 60s. But now it's 2021 and things have evolved even further.
Yeah.
And I don't think the film stands the test of time in that respect.
As a work of fiction, it's definitely it's a great film.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's too many. There are some, like we've said, there are some positivities in there in regards to mental health. I think one of the things that I do think I like about it and I do praise it for is it does portray everyone in there as, a real person, a real human being with nuance.
Yeah.
And that's more a strength. I think that's more of a strength of the actors than anything else. They all really turn
great cast.
They all turn very, very good, convincing performances in that. But again, it in some aspects it very whitewashes a lot of things. I think one of the real, like, honestly, it's one of the more critical points of the film is when they escape and they go and stay with Brittany Murphy and she kills herself. It's very impactful and it's also, I think, like, the message that I would choose to take away from that one is that you do need to be careful with, you can't, that approach of, here's the shit that's wrong with you and you should just get over it, can do so much more damage than you might think. You might think you're being that tough love approach. Some people may respond well to it. Some people, you may force them further down into a dark hole.
There are parallels to, there have been studies that prove that fat shaming encourages people to gain weight rather than lose weight. I think there's probably a parallel there. Case
in point, going back to Girl Interrupted, when there's I forget her character name, but the blonde one who's clearly got anorexia.
Oh, is it Janet?
Janet, yeah. And one of the first scenes with her, they're walking, she's like, give me back my fucking clothes. And Whoopi Goldberg's like, well, eat something.
Yeah, like, oh, wow, thanks. That fixes me.
Yeah, it's like, you take away my clothes, I'll eat to get my clothes back and I'm better now. It's like, Jesus Christ. Like, being someone who suffers with an eating disorder, we'll talk about that in a different episode when I feel a bit more comfortable about it. But yeah, shit ain't that simple.
No.
Like, you can't just be like, hey, don't have an eating disorder. I mean, the amount of poor fucking motherfuckers that are like, hey, just eat. And here's a banana. I'm like, if
I had a penny for every time you've been offered a banana.
Okay, just this is a PSA for any of my friends that might be listening to this, and anyone. If you offer me a banana again, I will punch you.
That's that irrational rage we were talking about. No, actually, I think that's fair. You've been offered a lot of bananas in the
I don't even like the motherfucking things. I mean, I love banana flavor, but who wants to eat baby food in fruit form?
Just babies. Probably not even babies.
Because, like, that's what they are. Bananas are just a tube, like a naturally occurring tube of baby food. They are mush. Like, they're only good dried or in frozen. Bread. Or in bread or frozen. Or in milk, blended in milkshakes.
And there are better things to have frozen.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But frozen bananas are really nice.
But if someone was like, you can have this frozen banana or you can have this pint of Ben & Jerry's,
Yeah, but
I'm not going to say the banana.
But
that's a me problem.
I'd put the frozen banana in the pint of Ben and Jerry's and split the difference.
Depends on the flavor.
Banana goes, like, the thing is, banana flavor goes with everything, like virtually everything.
That's true.
Like, pro tip, if you're ever in the Netherlands, get pancakes with banana, bacon, and maple syrup. Banana and bacon is one of the best fucking combinations going. Like, for pigs, the pigs in blanket, the sausage wrapped in bacon, man, like deep fried a banana wrapped in bacon.
Hey, you don't even have to be in the Netherlands. You can do that in your own home and nobody can stop you.
That I would strongly recommend. So, bacon, banana, cheese, maple syrup, and powdered sugar. You'll have a great time, I promise you. Unless you're lactose intolerant or diabetic.
So or you don't like bananas or bacon.
Or vegetarian or vegan,
But all those things.
If you're normal.
If you can do it, you should do it.
Yes, definitely. It's like, you were skeptical at first.
I
right?
didn't. Yeah, I was a non-believer, I have to admit.
Yeah, but no, it's like, I've still not got around to trying it, but it's like all those people that swear by tuna and peanut butter.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't think that's an experience I need.
I'm like, I don't want to open a can of tuna and a tin of peanut, like a tub of peanut butter just to try it. But if I have one and the other at the same time,
would you make tuna in satay sauce?
Yes,
that's probably the right way to do it if you have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think most proteins go with the satay sauce. Like prawns, like fish definitely works with the satay sauce. Not a Dutch satay sauce, like a proper satay sauce. But yeah, so like, I guess in closing,
have bacon and banana pancakes
and
whenever you can.
Girl Interrupted is a great work of fiction, but don't go in there looking necessarily for
advice on
mental health. I mean, obviously it's set in the 60s when mental health was a pretty fucking barbaric thing.
Well, I mean, this is the thing. It was better than it had been. Like, in America, at least, in that era, they'd moved away from the institutions where it was like, just round up anybody who's acting weird and lock them away forever. And they'd gone to this more kind of community-based care. But what people understood and the therapies that were available was still pretty limited.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think there is that. But like I was saying to you before, I think there's definitely been a period of time where mental health was kind of a predatory practice. It was like, how can we remove this person from society?
Yeah, well, I think that was the point of the asylums, really.
Yeah.
It really was just get these people off the street. We're not worried about curing them. We just want them out of our faces.
Especially if you're a woman. Like, I mean, Jesus Christ, it was like, she's
got opinions about politics.
Lock her.
She's reading books.
And then you talk about like all the things like Valium and stuff that was just like, hey, women, you're at home, you're sad, take this drug.
Yeah, that was it. It was a really big thing.
What was the one you looked up earlier?
Milltown. I nearly called you Fergus. Casu, don't do that. Milltown. It was like a precursor to Valium, and it was very much marketed at American housewives in the 60s, in an era when, in theory, there were a lot more opportunities for women, but they weren't able to take them. And medicines like Milltown, their whole marketing campaign was like, are you sad because you're at home and you can't have a career and you've got 3 kids and you're only 21 and your husband's never here because he's playing golf with his secretary? Take some drugs. Instead of saying, like, how can we make society better for you, it's just, how can we numb you to your life? A
good example of that is the recent Netflix hit drama, The Queen's Gambit. Look at us being current. After talking about a film from, like, 2 decades ago. But yes, like, her mum in that, her adopted mum in that, just taking, and herself, like,
just drinking and taking drugs.
Like, the prevalence of just being like, oh, here you go, take these sedatives. There's some form of sedative. They're basically going to make you numb. And don't get me wrong, I love Valium. Like, Valium's great. Don't take this as a recommendation. I'm not giving you life advice. I have issues, as we've discussed. But yeah, like, Valium, great whiskey chaser. No.
Can I interject?
Yes.
Stick with the fucking bacon and banana pancakes.
Yeah. No, don't take. Do take some health. Like, do take like what take what I've said and talked about, man. But don't take my advice on Valium. To be fair, I mainly use it because I have a fucking horrible back.
That's true.
But don't. So anyway, in closing, yes. There are some interesting films out there. There are interesting Windows looks at how, I think more than anything else with films like Girl Interrupted and, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and things like that, it's a good insight into how people at the time and how the filmmaker views mental illness. More so than it is about societal things. I mean, obviously societal and the zeitgeist at the time will play a role in that. But it's definitely more than looking at the mental illness itself or the care itself. It's more the perception of mental illness, I think, is more what you can take away from that kind of film.
Yeah, agreed.
So that's the thing in closing. So I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of a impromptu rant on BPD, and I know we may have covered some ground that we touched on before, but this is a little bit more focused on just BPD and especially Girl Interrupted as well, and mental health in media, I guess, to some extent. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope it's been fun and maybe a little educational, a little eye-opening. Like I say, any other stuff that we've referenced and that I've used to prepare for this show in like half an hour, I'll link to in the show notes. And you can join us again next week, and we'll be back with a bit more of a fun episode where we figure out who's the better bad guy between Skeletor and Cobra Commander.
It's going to be good.
Yeah, it's going to be good. And we're going to have Bungle. Yeah, and we're going to have Bungle back. And we're probably going to follow it up some point after that. Not the next episode, but the logical next step, which is Serpentor versus Hordak. And classic Hordak, not as much as I love him, not the Hordak from the She-Ra reboot. But do make sure you subscribe and watch out for our new episodes, because we've also got another episode coming up soon where we're going to be talking about hot sauces, and we're going to have a new guest joining the show so to help us navigate the discussion of hot sauce, and that's going to be like what hot sauces are good, the levels of hot sauce, and how to make hot sauce. So yeah, if that's something that interests you, make sure you click that subscribe button on wherever you get your podcasts, and stay tuned. And until then, we shall love you and leave you, and we will catch you next time when we talk about Skeletor and Cobra Commander.
Gonna be great.
Take care.
Bye.
Stay safe.